Good day, good people. This is Heather Heteru with some lessons for the journey. And in my journey, there are things that I believe that I've gone through, witnessed, and traveled so that I could be able to share it with others. That's really important to me. And as part of this journey, as part of being a village elder, as part of being a personal change coach, as part of helping people take the next steps in their journey, I think it's important to be able to share some of the important benchmarks on this journey. And so today I want to talk about, in my lessons for the journey, I want to talk about the faces of suicide. As a as one who has experienced dying by suicide and being here to share the information with you, I wanted to be able to provide you with some insight, with some tools, and some ways to avoid the pitfalls that sometimes grief and loss can cause as it relates to suicide. That also includes the guilt. It also includes shame. It also includes those things that we have control over and some of the things that we don't have control over. But I don't want you to be left out in the cold and not know that there are other tools and that there is a next step and there is a future for you. So I want to talk about that a little bit. When most people who know me, who work with me, may never understand or know that this is a face of suicide. This was over 20 years ago, but it's still a part of my journey and it's still a part of who I am today. I wanted to share some insight into my story to make sure that if you are in these nuances, that you also have tools. My challenge at the time was that I did not have the tools. We did not have our internet at our fingertips at that time. We didn't have access to resources in the way that we do today, and it certainly wasn't talked about in the way that is talked about now. And I'm still talking about suicide and people who die by suicide, who choose suicide as an option. And so on my journey, not only have I met other people who have made that choice, some who are the survivors of someone who died by suicide, whether they were a parent, whether they were a mate, whether they were a child, whether they were a friend. And I want people to be empowered by the stories that I share today. I want you to be empowered by the missteps that I took. I want you to be empowered and understand that this is not the end for you. And so I think that's an important perspective to have. I think it's a powerful perspective to have. And again, I want you to be empowered by what we discussed today. So the faces of suicide, you think that you're able to know and pick out somebody and say, oh, yeah, they may be more likely to exercise suicide than this person. But you can't tell by looking at a person. You can't tell that they're in crisis or that they're in distress. And I was particularly much younger, but I was also good at putting on my mask. We mask a lot of our pain just to get through the day. We mask a lot of our pain to avoid ridicule or criticism or judgment. We mask a lot of that. And because at that time, I was in the midst of my career and I was elevating in that career space. And at the same time, I had gone through a divorce. And at that same time, I had lost my best friend who died as a result of toxemia, giving birth to her child. And the two people for me who would have been supportive, who I was most close to, were the two people who I had lost. One from a physical loss, one from a loss by death. And I did not realize that I didn't have the tools because I kept pushing until I was exhausted, pushing through, trying to understand why I was going through a divorce from somebody who at the time I believed to be my soulmate, who wasn't giving me any answers as to what was happening in our relationship other than he just needed space. And so, because I didn't have the answers for that, and because I didn't understand why my friend had to die, why did she have to die? I didn't know what to do about it. I only knew that I kept taking in more pain, more stress. And at one point, I did visit a counselor, a therapist. And because I didn't have a good connection with that counselor or therapist, I stopped going. I went for the first session as my relationship was coming to an end, and I went again after her death and after my relationship had ended. And I didn't connect with her in a way that I needed to, and I couldn't get any answers or really real tools to help me navigate what I was going through. And again, I was still trying to talk through it, but I was also I was very embarrassed. I didn't want to talk to my family about the divorce because we had a beautiful wedding. And so if you have if you had this experience where you are going through a divorce and you had, like I did, had a beautiful experience and everybody was involved because you were expecting that this was it. And for me, this was my soulmate. So I had the wedding of a lifetime. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And everybody was there. And to have to go back and tell the same people after 3 years that we were no longer married and he left me. And to have to try to share that was very painful. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I didn't even know what to do to save my marriage. So I felt like I didn't have any tools in that respect. And I didn't know what was going on because I was totally blindsided by that. And so I want to talk about how our relationships are a part of the journey, one, but also how painful when they unravel, how that can be. But I also want us to take a step back and look at us. I had to take a step back and look at myself and understand about me, what made me happy. And actually going through that process forced me into that space where I had to look at my own self. I had to look and dig deeper into what was healthy for me. What kind of decisions was I making? Did I actually make the decision to be married with the right tools? Did I understand what it meant to be married at that time? Did I understand what it meant to go into a committed relationship like that? Did I have a spiritual foundation to help me navigate that relationship? So there were some things that I still had to learn about me that I hadn't thought about because I was still young. I was in my early 20s when I got married. And I was inexperienced. It was my first marriage. So some of those dynamics were part of my pain points that kind of started to drive me into the depression and the cover up. So I had a big cover up. I had a cover up around trying to second guess what happened instead of, again, looking inward for myself and making sure that I felt whole and complete, and that the fact that my relationship no longer was working didn't mean that I ended. And that was one of the lessons that I learned. Because my relationship ended, it did not mean that I had an end. And I took that rejection and abandonment as the end of who I was. It was the end of a marriage, not the end of me. So I want other people who go through makeups and breakups, and whether it's a separation, whether it's a loss, that those things do not define your personal end. It defines an end of a season, an end of a relationship, an end of a time, but not an end of you. So make sure as you're taking this journey that you're able to separate the two. Separate the two. The other experience I would encourage you to take is to do more self-exploration. Do more self-exploration. Find out who you are, because you also change. You change in relationships, you change outside of relationships, you change in between relationships, and honor the changes that you're making. And one of the tools that I always encourage people to do is to journal. Write it down. Make sure that you set a date of when you're writing this entry, because sometimes that is a part of the process of kind of unraveling the threads, unraveling the pain and unraveling the hurt. I was always writing anyway, but I didn't see it as a tool at the time, but it was part of my saving grace that after or over time, what I wrote helped me to reflect on what I was feeling at that time. Then I could go through the process of healing because I had something in front of me that I could look at that was tangible, that would help me be able to navigate and understand my future me. And that was a really important part too. When I had reached a certain point beyond my grief, beyond my loss, and beyond my own death, I was able to see some things differently. I was able to see where I was vulnerable. I was able to see how the things that were happening to me and my understanding of it, because I had written it down. I didn't try to keep it in my head. And I encourage you to write down the experience. If you have to record it on your phone, if you have to do a video recording, whatever you need to do to document what you're going through is so very important, because when we're going through, there are a couple of things that are happening. The first one I want you to always self-check is whether you are hydrated or not. We make decisions from survival mode when we're not hydrated. And I mean, it seems like such a small thing, but having the water, having the fluids running through your body, having that currency moving through your body is crucial, because otherwise they're called executive functions. So the things that help you to make good decisions versus rash decisions are part of that executive function. Otherwise, you're in survival mode. And so when you're in survival mode, that means that all of those fluids, the oxygen, is going to the place in your body that needs it the most. Rational thinking is not the most important piece. So you may not be getting the full effect of a good decision. So the first thing I want you to do, especially if you're in that crisis state, is drink water. Drink water. Because also, if you want to look at it even deeper, the spirit is in the water. That's where our babies are nurtured for the time that they're in us. That when we're giving birth, that's why the water is the water of life for them. They need to be hydrated, and that's why they have that access to water. And we also have learned over time that the personality, the attributes of water, the negative and positive things that we say in affirmations are also captured by water. So if you're constantly feeling and saying and seeing negative things, that is what is being imprinted in your body. And so if you watch social media, if you watch horror movies, if you watch all of these types of things that you continue to put in your body, especially when you're going through a crisis situation, it could be imprinted in you. It can be imprinted in your thoughts. It can be imprinted in your body, and your body responds to the words or the imagery that it sees. And so we want to make sure that you keep the positive words in front of you, even if you have to write down those words, even if you have to repeat them over and over again. So when we talk about the face of suicide is, it could be any face. It could be any face. It could be anybody. It could be any station in life. And clearly, we've seen that over time. We've seen it with Whitney Houston, and we've seen it with her daughter. We've seen it in family, friends, and loved ones. And it didn't matter about how old they were. It didn't matter what circumstance they had. It didn't matter if we thought they had everything they needed. And so I want to make sure that we are mindful of it, that suicide does not have a face. It does not have a specific face. It doesn't have a specific expression. And it's hard to read. And just like I was sharing with me, I had to put on a mask. I wore a mask to mask my grief and my pain. And I did it intentionally, so it was intentional. And if you weren't looking at the cracks in my mask, if you weren't looking at the cracks in my surface, you could have missed it very easily, especially because I was always the strong one. I was the smart one. I was the one that had it all together. It was part of my mask. I had to keep thinking like that just to get through the day. But when I got home, my mask always fell flat to the ground. And I was always exposed looking at myself in the mirror, looking at my circumstance, and then feeling my pain. And so I want to make sure that people who believe that you can mask it, it's not a good strategy to try to mask it. It's a better strategy to try to share it with someone that you trust. And if you don't know somebody that you trust, then you seek professional help. Here's a number that you can always text. It's 988. You can text it from your mobile phone. And there are also other avenues, and they can help you. And what I like about 988 is that I've used it personally. I've used it with other people, and they stay with you until you reach a point where you can breathe. That was one of the stages for me where I found it difficult just to breathe every day. It always felt like somebody was standing on my chest, and I was fighting to breathe. I was fighting to get through the day, and I knew that it was just a feeling that I was having, but my feeling kept manifesting physically. And so I had physical pain as a result of it. Tired, fatigued, didn't want to be bothered, kept isolating. I tried to do enough so that people wouldn't, especially my family, that they wouldn't come and look deeper. But the truth is, I needed somebody to look deeper. The truth is, I needed somebody to say, it's going to be okay. I needed somebody to say, this is where you are right now. Grief has stages. Even if you lost a job, because you still face some of the same symptoms. If you lost a loved one, you may still face the same symptoms. If you lost a relationship, still face some of the same symptoms. And other people may tell you, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. People say that, but they don't offer any real tools to support that. They should say it's going to be okay because this is the stage you're in, and these are some of the things that you can do to get through it. This is not the end of you. Nobody ever told me that it wasn't the end of me. And I just could not imagine living my life without my best friend or living my life without my husband. I couldn't see that. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't conceive of what it would be to live every day without them. And both of them at the same time. It was very, very difficult. And so I think it's important that, one, we are not deceived by the mask that we wear, that we don't try to deceive ourselves, and we don't try to deceive others, and for others to stay vigilant, especially if they know that you're going through. So some of the things I want you to pay attention to is, even though somebody may be extremely smart or intelligent or brilliant, it doesn't mean that they don't go through trauma. I want you to know that just because you think that somebody has everything, it doesn't mean that they think they have everything. Because clearly something is missing that will allow depression and pain and hurt and grief to overcome them. The other thing I want you to be vigilant about is having the idea that somebody has it all together. Like, I've got it all together. And it may be true that some of the things that they need to have on the surface are intact. But sometimes even underneath, strong people break. And so I want you to be mindful that even though somebody has the appearance of being strong or having it all together, it doesn't mean they don't need encouragement and support. So your words, when you know somebody is going through, or even if you don't, kindness is one of the most important attributes that you can offer. Saying a kind word to someone, especially when you know that they're going through, it takes a lot of pressure off of a person to know that somebody else cares, even if they don't want to disclose the whole the things that are bringing them pain to you. That they know that you're supporting them and encouraging them is key. So don't be deceived by the mask. If you're kind to everyone, then someone is going to benefit. The other thing that I want you to be mindful for is the voice of suicide. Sometimes, and this is for the individual, the person that is facing the trauma or the loss that is causing them to have the suicidal ideation, right? Sometimes we take on other people's stuff. There are a lot of people who are empathic. There are a lot of people who are deeply empathetic. There are a lot of people who have their own drama that they add then other people's drama on top of. And it gets so overwhelming that you're unable to help yourself or help anyone else. So I want you to be careful and be mindful of the voices of suicide. That means hearing other people in your household say how stressed out they are about the finances, or hearing your friends talk about how stressful they are about not having that significant other in their lives. You have to be paying attention to these things. How do we help redirect the voice of suicide? And then the other one that I really want you to pay deep attention to is the voice in your own mind that's telling you or coaching you and saying, yeah, this is never going to end and this is the right thing to do. Like, those voices will play over and over in your head too. Be mindful, be focused, stay focused, get some help so that the voices that you're hearing are voices of hope. The voices that you're hearing are voices of help. And the voice that you're hearing most of all is your own, saying how important you are, how valuable you are, and how because you were born into purpose. You were born for a purpose. And if you don't know that, then it's more time to explore what that is. The next point I want to share with you is that suicide and the memories of suicide can be haunting. So it's that feeling that you get when you hear that somebody died by suicide, and the thoughts that also fill your mind. Why did they do it? How did they do it? What were they thinking? What were they feeling? How come I didn't know? What could I have done more? What could I have done better? How could I have supported them? So I think it's important because it can also send you into a state of regret. It can send you to a state of confusion. It can send you into a state of blame and shame. Like, this was my fault. I should have known that this was going to happen, or I should have saw this happening. Why didn't I hear this happening? This happens with parents. This happens with mates. This happens with friends. So it's not your fault not to accept the blame. What we do so that it does not haunt us is we do something now. We commit to giving attention to the people who we care about. We commit to being kind to others. We commit to getting more resources or more tools. We commit to sharing our journey. We commit to not isolating or allowing other people to isolate. Because part of that isolation starts to become the voices that we hear. The voices that challenge us, the voices that scare us, the voices of what happened in our past. Those voices also can haunt you. Some of the things that a lot of people have gone through our trauma by people who we loved, trusted, and cared about, who we thought loved and cared about us. But they put us in situations and they've done things that caused more harm than good. That is a reality for many people that have gone through those types of trauma. The idea is that you can still work through those traumas. Because something was done to you doesn't mean that you're a throwaway. It doesn't mean that your life can't be different. It doesn't mean that you won't heal. There is a healing that is taking place over many of us. We have to make sure that we're around long enough to get to the healing, to do the deeper work. There is deeper work. There is a bigger purpose for your life. And when you don't know that, or when that is cloudy and it's not clear for you, that's the time when you do more self-exploration. That's the time when you start to find things that you like to do, things that are fun and exciting, being able to use your imagination and wish for something greater. Also, I want to share that there is the part of the haunting or the energy that is prolonged when someone takes their life and how it affects you after that. There's a lingering of that feeling. There's a feeling that why am I still here? There's a feeling that I can. What if this is something that I need to do? Like it starts to snowball. And so it's a lot of statistics around how people who experience or are close to someone who has that experience of dying by suicide or even suicidal ideation or attempts, that it affects those people who are closest to them. This is part of the haunting that I mentioned. It really is a energy, a frequency that will pull you into that world when it's not for you to be there. How we combat that is that we combat that voice with the voice of something positive. If you know who your source is, then you turn to your source for answers. If you have someone that you trust, a mentor, a therapist, a counselor, someone that you can talk through it with, even if the only person you have is you, put it on the recorder. Especially when you start to hear and start to question that voice and that haunting, it's important that you recognize it for what it is. It's often not your own voice. It is the curious nature of life and death. It is the curious nature of what happens and what it's like to die. It's the curious nature of how we look at and value ourselves. That part is very, very difficult. And so as we continue to have this conversation on Lessons for the Journey, I want to introduce you to people who are much like me, who had that experience and or had a loved one, whether it was a child, a mate, a parent, who also made the decision to take their own lives and put an end to the gift of life that we've been given. And again, this is not about judgment. And my goal is that you begin to remove the judgment from yourself. If you are one who had an experience with suicide or suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts, you do not have to go back to that. You can continue to move forward in your life. And so I want to talk about some of those tools to help you continue to move forward. I want you to practice. And I know this is a very crude example, but if you've ever had, it's a type of a tape that is sticky on one side, and when you pull back the layers, it's sticky on the second side too. It's a double-sided tape. Sometimes it's Velcro on one side. Sometimes it's a cushion or some type of cushion that is between the surfaces of what you're trying to do. It could be sometimes there are the little patches that you can put on the wall that you don't want to damage walls, right? But it's something on this side, then there's something in the middle, and then there's another something on this side. Both sides are designed to hold something in place. And the part in the middle is just a buffer. And so between our grief and our hurt, there's a buffer in the middle, and then something that we have to cling to. That something that we have to cling to, again, it can be your source, but it can also be the next iteration of you, the next elevation of you is on this side, and then your pain and hurt may be on the other side, but in between is your figuring things out. In between is sharing your story. In between is talking about the pain that you're experiencing and that you're not alone. So you want to make sure that you have something on both sides. If there's pain on this side, then you have a buffer in the middle, whatever that might be. And then on the outside, you have something to cling to, including your future. That's a really important perspective to have, that on the other side of through, there's another side of going through. And that is what you also need to cling to. Let's see. And I also wanted to share about the guilt, the shame, and the isolation. Those are key factors or influences in this journey. And you want to make sure that as you are experiencing these things, that you continue to build new tools. Continue to build new tools. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the risk factors, and then we're going to get into understanding a little bit more about the tools and opportunities. So when I did some research, it talked about the mental health risk factors to people who have either died by suicide, people who have made attempts, and those people who have survived, and those who are and remain survivors. So some mental health conditions that may increase the opportunities or the chances for people to experience suicide or suicidal ideation, just under mental health, include depression, substance abuse problems, whether you have more severe mental challenges like bipolar or schizophrenia, traits of aggression and anger, when you have mood changes, or you have consistent bad relationships, or it seems to be that you have consistent or bad relationships, that you seem to have some areas in your life where you feel out of control, or you feel somebody is trying to control you. Anxiety is another one. Anxiety, fear of whatever that might be, fear of somebody finding out your secrets, fear of, somebody knowing that you did something. And those are also important risk factors to pay attention to. And if you've been in those situations, the first thing you want to do is reach out, because you need more tools. Other things that might cause it is finding out you have a serious health condition, and also if you had some head injuries, so some closed head injuries, some trauma to your frontal lobe, and that could be it could be concussion, it could be you hit your head. Like, those things can also shift your way of thinking. So that's just kind of the first level. The other things that we need to make sure that we are aware of, and especially for people who know somebody that's in this state, one of the first things we have to do is make sure that their environment is safe. So that includes making sure that if they have firearms or drugs, that they are locked up and that they're kept away, and that you are sharing the fact that you know that these things are in the house or that are in the area, but you want to make sure that those things are, again, they are away from that person who's in that state at that time. When you know people have been under prolonged stress, harassment, bullying, relationship problems, or even if they've been terminated from a job, for some people, you may be strong enough to go through that life experience, but there are other people who may have additional trauma attached to those things. So we want to make sure that if you know that somebody's going through it, to make sure that you help to address it and that you can go with them as they're getting help. You can go with them and call the 988 number. So any of those things that lead people to that in terms of our environment is another important thing to consider. Also, the historical components of suicide, suicidal ideation, and suicidal attempts. So part of it is that if you had a history of suicide or suicidal attempts, if it has happened in your family or in your close friendships, if there has been abuse, neglect, or other types of trauma like molestation or a rape, or especially when it's somebody you know, especially when you feel that you had a choice to report it or not report it, and you're feeling guilt and shame around that, maybe those things could also impact you in that thought and that thinking. Again, you don't have to be isolated. You don't have to be ashamed. Some things we did not have control over. But what you do have control over is what you do next. You have control over what's next for you. Other protective factors that are available to us is access to mental health, being proactive about your own mental health. That means finding some ways to have other activities to focus your attention outside of what you're going through now, just to have interest, just to have other ways that you can use that energy in a way that's positive for you, in a way that's uplifting. Whatever that means for you, you have to get out of the frequency of and the vibration of the suicidal ideation. So that means you have to have some tools about how you can elevate yourself, how you can bring those things to you that help you feel good about you, help you feel good about who you are, what you're doing, make you laugh. Maybe you have a particular movie that you like that makes you laugh. Maybe there's a person that's in your life that can always make you laugh. Whatever that is to raise your vibration or your frequency is a great thing to do. Grounding in nature is another great thing to do. Nature is its own healer and ours too. So you can go and ground. That means put your feet in the grass and the sand and the dirt. That means get reset and ground. Be out in nature, meaning you get more oxygen. You have more opportunities to expand your lungs, so you can get rid of some of the toxins that we've already breathed into our bodies. Toxic thoughts, toxic words. This is another way to help cleanse and reset. Here's some warning signs that, again, this is from Healthline, as a matter of fact. Some of the warning signs are conversations around death and dying. Some of the warning signs include the feeling of being helpless, or that you don't have control over what happens to you next, feeling like you have no reason to live, feeling like you're a burden to others, feeling like you're being trapped, or that you've have had unbearable pain from grief, loss, hurt, and shame, and some of those other attributes that we may experience throughout our lifetime. So I think it's important that we recognize some of the risk factors. Some of the other things that they talk about to be aware of is when people start to give away things that were meaningful to them or that were important to them at one time. And that's a big warning sign, if you will, to pay attention to what people are doing. The more they isolate, to also pay attention to that. These are really important warning signs. So if you know somebody that has a trauma that you know about, that has experienced grief or loss, this is a great opportunity for you to connect with them and give them some of the tools and resources there. You can look these up online. And to also, I think it's important, and this is what was important to me in my journey, is that I did not know that there were stages of grief. I didn't know that there were stages of grief. And because I didn't know that, I didn't know I had something to look forward to. I didn't know that it could be a time where I could breathe and I wouldn't feel like someone was stepping on my chest. I needed to know that. So for those of you who are in this space and you're supporting somebody that's really going through grief and loss or pain, whether that loss is a job, a relationship, a loss of a loved one, it's important for people to understand what are potential next steps. And it doesn't mean that you have to know the when is going to happen. But if you help people recognize them, then at least you know where you are on the map. You know that you're somewhere on the map and that there is a place that you have started. There's a place where you are now, and there's a place for you to go to from here. That was my big challenge. It did not feel like it was a place I could go to from here. And I want to stress this because this is one of my missing pieces of information. This is one of the tools that I was missing that allowed me to go through this process. But I am here for a reason. I was brought back for a reason, not because I did anything so wonderful or so great. I was brought back here to tell you what I'm sharing with you now. These are ways to prevent suicide, suicidal attempts, suicidal ideation. These are ways to recover from those grief and loss and traumatic things that may have happened to you. It's important that you, again, there's what may happen on this side, what happens in the middle of that, and what you decide to do next. That next is next step, next day, next week, next year, next month. That is next, what's next for you. And if you have a sense of what's next for me, it will likely deter you away from the suicidal attempts, ideation, and suicidal thoughts and actions. So we want to help as many people. I want to help as many people to understand these tools and to understand that I did not want to die. I wanted the pain to stop. I didn't want to feel the way that I was feeling, but I did not know that that feeling would eventually heal, that I could eventually heal from that space. I didn't know that. I didn't feel that at the time, and I didn't have the encouraging words helping to support me through that. And so I decided and I chose a path that was not right and not good for me. And I encourage those of you who are experiencing this, who have experienced this, and who have somebody in your life who has also experienced this. This is a really important piece of information. These 3 pieces I need for you to remember. I need for you to remember that it has no face. Suicide has no face. It can be anybody that is close to you who has lost sight of the tools that they have, that have lost sight of the future that is theirs, that their purpose has yet to be fulfilled. We all have that destination. We all have the destination of death, but we don't have to rush it. If we're here for a reason and for a purpose. We have to continue to work to find that purpose. And so I want to make sure, I'm going to go through some of the stages of grief, but I want you to know that it's not the pain that we want to keep. It's not the pain that we want to keep. And somehow we have not been able to separate the pain or the hurt or the shame from the actual decision to take your life. We have to be able to separate the two. They're not the same. So, and in between that, the thing that you can do in between that, again, you can text 988, get some help, get somebody on the phone. It's almost immediate. They answer the phone, it's almost immediate, and they will work with you. You don't have to be the person that's making the call that is also suffering from the thoughts. But as a friend, if you don't know what else to do, call. It's anonymous. That's another thing. They don't have to know you personally. They're just trying to get you help, and there are people who can help stay with you until you're able to get through the crisis. So again, you do not have to die to manage the pain. You just need more tools. So also, I want you to remember, in addition to the suicide not having to face, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived by the voices that you're hearing. Don't be deceived by the mask that you're wearing or that somebody else is wearing. And then third, identify the stage of grief that you're in. So if you're at the different stages of grief, you're able to understand that there is another stage after this until you get to a point where you can go through the healing process. And there is a healing. There is a healing. It may take more time than others, but it's not on a watch. It is in your healing. The more you put into you, improving you, understanding you, you can move through these stages. So here are the 7 stages of grief. And I pulled it from kind of 2 different places. So these stages, the first one is shock and denial. It says this is a state of disbelief and numb feelings, pain and guilt. You may feel that the loss is unbearable and you're making other people's lives harder because of your feelings and your needs. Anger and bargaining. You may lash out. You may tell God or a higher power that you'll do anything if they only grant you relief from these feelings and situation. Depression. This may be a period of isolation and loneliness during which you process reflect on the loss. The upward turn. At this point, the stages of grief, like anger and pain, have died down, and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. Reconstruction and working through. You can begin to put the pieces of your life back together and move forward. And then the last stage, which can be longer, is acceptance and hope. This is a very gradual acceptance of the new way of life and a feeling of possibility for the future. So it says that this also can happen with a breakup or divorce. So it kind of looks like this. For shock and denial, it says she absolutely wouldn't do this to me. She realized that she was wrong and she'll be back tomorrow. The pain and guilt. How could she do this to me? How selfish is she? Did I mess this up? And anger and bargaining. If she'll give me another chance, I'll be a better boyfriend. I'll give her more than she ever asked for. Depression. I'll never have another relationship like this. I'm doomed for every relationship at this point to fail. The turn up. The end was hard, but there could be a place in the future where I could see myself in another relationship. Reconstruction and working through. I need to evaluate the relationship and learn from my mistakes. And then acceptance and hope. I have a lot to offer another person. I just have to meet them. So I think it's important that we understand that there are stages. Find where you are in the stage. Understanding where you are puts you on the map. It's like when you go to the rest stops and it says, you look at the map and it says you are here. You may have been coming from Detroit. You may be on your way to Florida. But right now, you are here. And so we want to make sure that we take advantage of the resources and the tools that are for us. Again, the number that you need to call, if you or someone you love is in a crisis, you can call and text 988. Text 988 so that you can get help immediately. There is not a long wait for that call, and it's something that you can do right now. Even if you're just thinking about it, even if you're just at that stage, this is that something that's in between. If you need more tools, consider using affirmations. Find your affirmation or find your scripture or find that message that makes you feel good. And then use that and keep repeating it over. Or find new information and get somebody else to affirm those things for you and with you. That's what we use prayer for. So I know this was a lot. I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to at least talk to you about the phases of grief, that there really are none. But there are tools that we can use to help us navigate these important and deep waters, because everybody at some point is going to experience grief, loss, and pain, what do we do about it? How do we help one another through it? And if you're not ready to talk to someone else, there are other things that you can do. And I hope that these tips, that the words that I shared with you encouraged you today and help you to understand that your path is ahead of you. Your journey is right now, and this is a part of it. So don't get caught up and lost in those spaces where you don't have control over them. What you do is find the spaces that you do control, and you can control whether you're with us now or not. We need you here. We need you here. So continue to pray, continue to push, continue to explore who you really are, and then find your space in the stages so that you know where you are. You are here, and we need you to stay here. My name is Heather Het-Heru. I'm a personal change coach and village elder. I am also available through Your Inspired Journey. That's www.yourinspiredjourney.com. You can reach me by phone at 313-759-7855. If anything that I've shared with you was a help to you, please let me know. And if you have somebody that you want to help, please reach out. You're not alone. Again, you need that crisis number right now. It is texting 988. I hope you have a blessed day. Looking forward to sharing more lessons for the journey.